gave me when Jacob passed away. And every time you look at Jacob, just remember what he's done for so many lives. I gotta put these on, or I won't be able to read. My name is Ginger Covert, and I'm Jacob's mom, a core donor. Jacob Eaton Rhodes made me a mama on September 28th, 2001. Jacob was one of those kids that always lived life to his fullest, and there was never a dull moment with him. Jacob was hard-headed, but a complete joy. He kept me on my toes. Jacob was always having fun. All the pictures I've taken of him, he was always doing something silly for the camera. He turned the simplest task into fun. He was a very happy kid. Jacob loved working outside. In fact, he thought work was fun. He was always by my side doing the yard work. He would beg me to do yard work. When he was 3 years old, he was sitting in a combine learning how everything worked. He would go out for hours with his papa's farm crew. He had what they called a little buddy seat. Every night before bed, I would read to him construction books. So I was not surprised at all when he chose to be a big equipment operator. If Jacob put his mind to something, he did it. He did struggle some in school, but his mechanical skills were unbelievable. He was so good with his hands. There wasn't anything Jacob couldn't do once he put his mind to it. At his young age of 20, he started his apprenticeship with the International Union of Operator Engineers, the IUOE. At 20, he was selected. He belonged to District 6. Jacob had recently started out to venture on his own excavating business called Rhodes Excavating. He had his own excavator, skid steer, dump truck, hauling flatbed, trailer, and had just recently purchased a stump grinder. Jacob was doing so well with his business. He was going to venture out on his own full-time in the fall. We were very proud parents. At the time of his death, all his equipment was paid off except for the stump grinder he had just purchased. On August 4th, 2023, my husband Mark and my daughter Gina and I traveled to Tampa, Florida. We left our house in Butler, PA at 1:30 a.m. to catch our flight scheduled for 5 a.m. We landed in Florida about 9 a.m. We were to meet my brother-in-law and my in-laws there for our family weeks-long awaited vacation. We had been up for several hours and were exhausted, but we were making the most of this special vacation. After all, we were in Florida. We got settled in to our rooms and then headed out to dinner. On our way to dinner, we saw the most beautiful rainbow I'd ever seen. It was gorgeous. I said to Gina, "Look how beautiful that rainbow is," and I took a few pictures of it. After dinner, I couldn't wait to get back to the room and just rest. I knew I would be more rested in the morning and we could make the most of our vacation the next day. Then my husband, Mark, said to me, "Let's walk down to the beach. I want to see the sunset." And I said, "Oh, I don't want to go." And he said, "Come on, come with me, come down to the beach." So I caved and I said, "All right, I'll go down to the beach with you." We walked down to the beach. I put my feet in the water, felt the breeze in my hair and the sand between my toes. It was such an amazing feeling. The sunset on this Friday evening was gorgeous. It was one of the most beautiful sunsets I'd ever seen. And again, I took pictures of this beautiful sunset. On our walk back to our hotel room, my phone started to ring, and I looked down at my phone and saw that it was Jacob's stepmom. I thought to myself, why is she calling me? She knows we're on vacation. I went to hit decline, and I thought, I'll call her back when I get back to the room. But something told me I needed to answer the phone, as this was an odd occurrence. She never called me, only texted. On the other end, it wasn't his stepmom, it was Jacob's father. He said, "My phone is almost dead. That is why I'm calling you on Wendy's phone. You will need to keep in touch with me through her phone." I was still really confused, but I could tell something was seriously wrong. I could tell by his voice. He could barely speak to me. I said, "Jeff, what is wrong?" And he said nothing. I again said, "Jeff, what is wrong?" He said, "Ginger, you and Gina need to come home now." And then he proceeded to give me the most horrible news of my life. I won't go into the details, but it's quite disturbing and very upsetting. But Jeff told me Jacob was being life-flighted to AGH, and he did not feel Jacob had long to live. I needed to get home now. Now, we are 19 hours by car straight through, or 2 hours by plane. We needed to find a flight out of Tampa, Florida to Pittsburgh, PA immediately. My husband, Mark, was able to get us the 3 tickets into Pittsburgh. This story in itself is its own that I won't go into. As you can imagine, trying to get emergency flights home for 3 people was not easy, especially when we had just flown to Florida that morning. But Mark miraculously made our flights back to Pittsburgh, PA happen. We caught a flight for 5 a.m. and landed at 7 a.m. in Pittsburgh. My husband rushed us to Allegheny General Hospital, and I was met with a security guard that did not want to grant me access into the hospital. She was refusing to let me in, but with much persuasion and a phone call to the upstairs ICU staff, we convinced her she needed to let us in. I had to get to my son. He was on life support and he was dying. When I arrived upstairs to the ICU, I went to this small waiting room to wait till they told me I could go back to see Jacob. I wasn't there but maybe a few minutes. I don't remember anymore. When I was granted permission to go back and see Jacob, I won't go into the details about that either, because that was a horrible sight that I never will get out of my head. I was not prepared for what I saw. No parent should ever witness their child lying in a hospital bed unconscious with bandages, tubes, and machines. At first, I didn't know what to do. I remember saying, "Oh, Jacob." And I just started to cry. My husband, Mark, had to hold me up to keep me from collapsing to the floor. With Mark's arms around me and supporting me, I was able to get myself together enough to talk to him. I had to give him hope. I had to be his rock. So I started to talk to him. I rubbed his arms, his legs, his face. Anywhere I could see his skin, I wanted to comfort my baby. There's a lot of praying that goes on in these rooms. The pleading I did with God to spare his life, and then there was the nonstop crying. The feeling that you are in a nightmare and need to be woken up. I remember saying to my husband through the tears, "Wake me up. This is a dream. This can't be real. Wake me up, wake me up, wake me up." I cannot even imagine how my husband felt seeing his son lie there with me falling apart. I know he would have done anything to change all of this and make all of this go away, to spare me this horrible, agonizing pain. Gina was an absolute rock through everything. She was so amazing with me. While we were trying to get our flights, the hospital would call and give us updates on Jacob, and I was too distraught to talk, and she took care of all the calls and updates for me. Imagine, at her young age of 17 years, what she too was going through, yet she was still so strong. I'm gonna go back to the hospital now. The physicians came to Jacob's room and spoke with me one-on-one and said that unfortunately there was too much damage to Jacob's body and they were unable to save his life. We had already signed the paperwork for him to be an organ donor. Cor went over everything with us extensively before we signed the papers. Being an organ donor was something Jacob and I discussed when he was 16 and getting his driver's license. I told Jacob I was an organ donor and I believe very much in this. I explained that it was a very important decision and that after thinking it over, he should then make that decision for himself. And he did. He wanted to be an organ donor. Jacob was a very giving person. He said, "Mom, I want to help others. It makes perfect sense to give life to others when I can't be here anymore. And I'm in heaven with Jesus." He asked if I was okay with his choice to be an organ donor. I said, "I think it's an amazing choice that we can make when we're not here anymore, and that I 100% support you wanting to be an organ donor." That was the last conversation we ever had about the subject. So because of this conversation, I knew most likely he was still an organ donor, and of course he was. And I know that we had to honor his wishes. Jacob was one of the most loving humans you would ever meet. He would give you the shirt off his back, so we knew this would be the one way Jacob could finally help others. And I have never regretted that decision, and I too am still an organ donor, as is my daughter and my husband, Mark. Then at 9 a.m., the team of doctors and staff came into the room. I've been there for a couple of hours now. There's neurological tests that are required to be complete before they deem Jacob brain dead. Even though we had seen the CAT scans and all the tests were saying he was gone and nothing could be done to save his life, there are still many protocols that they must follow. I believe and know everything was done to save Jacob's life before his organs were recovered. The neurologist came in and proceeded to check Jacob to see if there were any neurological responses. They disconnected life support and proceeded to run tests on Jacob while we sat there. This is a 15-minute process. Jacob did not respond to their tests, but then a miraculous thing happened at 12 minutes. My son took a breath. The neurologist notes this and instructs the staff to immediately restart life support. The neurologist explained that Jacob took a breath at 12 minutes and that they must give the full 15 minutes because the base of the brain stem is the last fight for life. The brain stem plays a crucial role in regulating essential bodily functions, including breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. The doctor informed me that they would be back later on in the day to evaluate Jacob again. When I went over to Jacob after the staff exited the room, there was a little tear that came down his cheek. And I knew that tear was for me, and that he waited for me to make it back home. I could not imagine the will it took for him to take that breath to show me he held on for me, for us. I had spoken to him on the phone many times while I was at the airport awaiting the plane. His dad would hold the phone up to his ear so I could talk to him and tell him how much I loved him, how proud of him I was, and that I was coming to him to just hold on. At 3:58 p.m., the doctors and nurses came back to Jacob's room, and they performed the same tests again as earlier in the day. And so the long 15 minutes started again, and then ended at 4:12 p.m., August 5th, 2023. My son Jacob, age 21, was gone. I figured this would be it. No more staff coming in and checking on him. He would just lay there and wait till they found the matching donors. But to my surprise, I was completely wrong. At one point, the neurologist took me aside, and he cried with me. He was so sorry he could not save Jacob. To see this core staff he cared so much meant so much to me, and so it still does to this day. The staff treated my son as though he was still alive. The care he received was like nothing I'd ever seen. Those nurses doted on him and just took the best care of him. They wiped his face, put lotion on his skin, put cream on his lips so they did not dry out, and so they were very dry. I knew Jacob was in good hands. I had to trust them with my son's body, as I knew his spirit had gone to heaven. My son's body lay in the bed like he was sleeping. This is an experience that is very hard and difficult to describe. We were instructed on how the organ recovery process was going to work, and that they had to get everything in order to find the right recipients that were to receive Jacob's organs. This could take a couple of days to get everything organized. I received a call on Sunday, August 6, 2023, that Monday, August 7th, 2023, was the day Jacob would start saving lives. Our families and very close friends were asked to participate in an honor walk. An honor walk is where we walk behind Jacob as they wheeled his bed to the OR. The doctors, nurses, and core staff all stood in the hall as we went through the hall down to the OR. It was so moving and so surreal. Before they took Jacob, I remember one doctor taking my arm, putting his hands in my face, and looking into my eyes, and then giving me the biggest hug and told me he would take the very best care of Jacob. He was so deeply sorry that what we were all going through, and I knew he meant every word of it. I'm going to jump forward a couple of months. My precious son was going to save lives, and I knew from the start of this that I wanted to meet the recipients. I sent my letters to the recipients, and there were 2 recipients that responded back to me. I had 2 names. Krista received Jacob's liver, and Phil received Jacob's heart. Brief letters were sent back and forth a couple of times, and then I hadn't heard anything for about 18 months. Now I'm going to tell you about December of 2023. This was 3 months after Jacob passed. My daughter was a senior in high school, and we had promised to take her to New York City for her 18th birthday with her best friend. So we had this trip planned before Jacob had passed, and we decided we still wanted to take this trip with our daughter. The whole time on our way to New York City, we had just had this presence of Jacob. And I would look up into the sky, and there would be little rainbow reflections in the sky, and it was amazing. I felt like he was really following us there. The first evening, we went to St. Patrick Cathedral and lit 2 candles for Jacob. The peace of God and Jacob's presence we felt there. I just felt like he was with us the entire trip. It was incredible. We had a rainbow at the top of one of the buildings in West Thames Park. It was just a wonderful, peaceful trip. It will make sense to you shortly why I'm throwing this trip into the story. Jumping forward to January 16th, 2025, I got a call from Cora that Jacob's Heart recipient was ready to meet. Did I want to continue? And I said, yes. I had just about given up on hearing anything again, as it had been several months. As soon as I got Phil's email and phone number, I took it, wrote it down, and I just took some time to think about what I was about to do. This was a very huge step. Imagine this. The first sound I heard when I was carrying Jacob was his heartbeat. And hopefully I will hear his heartbeat again. And when the timing is right and Phil and I can meet in person, that will happen. So that day I sent the text to Phil, and he immediately responded. Everyone, this is Phil. Phil has Jacob's heart. He is a wonderful, amazing human being. I couldn't have picked a better recipient of Jacob's heart. Phil and I keep in touch. We talk often. We have Zoomed, and we are planning on meeting in person when the time is right. Here's the fun part. Guess where Phil lives? Phil lives in New York City. He was in the Manhattan Hospital in New York City when we were there in December 2023 on our little family trip. And I believe that is why we could feel Jacob with us on that entire trip. I want to close by saying shortly after Jacob passed away, I knew I needed to keep his legacy going on, and I needed to do something in his honor. I created along with my mom and my daughter Gina, the Jacob E. Rhodes Foundation, where we give scholarships to young people from the ages of 17 to 25, that they have the same entrepreneurial passion as Jacob. In the spring of 2024, we granted 3 $500 scholarships to 3 young, aspiring entrepreneurs. So in the short time of Jacob's passing, he passed August 5th, 2023, and on September 28th of 2023, Jacob's birthday, he would have been 22. We opened the Jacob E. Rhodes Foundation, and we have been fundraising money since, so that we can honor him and keep helping others just like Jacob did when he was alive. We also have beautiful ornaments that were made from a painting by a local artist, Carol Kennemuth, to honor and remember all of our loved ones who have passed. Part of the proceeds from these ornaments go to the Jacob E. Rhodes Foundation. I am so proud that my son, Jacob Eaton Rhodes, is remembered as a young, successful entrepreneur, an organ donor who saved 2 lives that I know of, and I'm told he will continue to save many lives with recovery tissue for 5 years following his death. I couldn't be prouder of the young man I raised. They say the important dates in life aren't the day you were born or the day you died. It's the dash in between. Jacob's life dash was full of life. He enjoyed every moment. I am so thankful I was able to witness all he accomplished in his short time here on earth. It was great. It was so very hard to capture one's life in a few pages. I hope I was able to share with you just a little of my son, and you see just how special he was. Knowing Jacob's heart is still beating brings me so much comfort. Knowing my son, he is rooting Phil on every day. Thank you for your time. I thank you for listening to me today. Thank you for honoring Jacob, my beautiful son, today, and listening to me speak about him. My final words for you are, max your life dash to the fullest, just like Jacob did.